Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Emerging Technologies and Creativity Research Lab Speaker Series. I'm really excited today to have with us Dr. Ray Pastore and Dr. Jason Engerman, who are going to be talking to us about eSports in general, but also specifically in education. This is a space that they have both been active in over the years, and I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning more about that. So if you gentlemen can go around and just introduce yourself to the people.
Jason, you want to go first, and then I'll just do mine and start my presentation right after?
Sure thing. My name is Dr. Engerman from East Stroudsburg University. I am an assistant professor in the Digital Media Technologies Department. Currently, I have the second NSF grant that I know of for eSports, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, but more holistically, I'm going to have a conversation about what's happening across the landscape from a business perspective and give you an idea of how we might consider changing our approaches to research for education in eSports as we into this new horizon.
All right, let me start sharing my screen with you guys. While I'm going to talk. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yes we can.
Okay. And just to warn you guys, my computer's acting a little funky for some odd reason this afternoon. So every time I push a button, sometimes it takes a couple seconds to do something. So we'll see how it works. Hopefully it works just fine. I'll start increasing the size while it probably takes a second. All right. It's doing this. Oh, well, that's okay, actually. And my presentation is not 36 slides, if you guys are seeing my screen. There's a bunch of other slides after it. All right. And I promise I won't be long. Hey, guys, welcome. My name is Ray Pastore. I'm an associate professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. This is my 10th year, finishing up my 10th year as a professor here at UNCW. I previously got my PhD at Penn State University. Prior than that, I was an instructional designer out in the field. I worked for corporate and government agencies doing a number of different things, including a lot of game design. You can see today what I want to talk about is I'm going to tell you guys on the next slide kind of what I've been doing in eSports. But I want to talk about eSports, and the title is A New Pathway for the Instructional Technologist. You can see here on the screen, I have some pictures of various organizations. Those are organizations that have either sponsored me at UNCW or sponsored what I'm doing with eSports at UNCW. One of them is a professional eSports team. Some of them are eSports organizations. Some of them are companies like Mountain Dew or Twitch. And you can see our UNCW eSports logo up on the screen. All right, so my path in esports. So first of all, I've been a player of video games since I was literally 3 years old. So we're talking like 1981. You can see on the picture in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is my old video game setup. That's my old TV and Nintendo and like some stuff like that. I've been playing for a lot of times. I started competing in video games in middle school through neighborhood tournaments because there was no such thing as esports. Later on in high school, I started to get more into it, and college with some games like GoldenEye 007. But I really didn't get into it until the early 2000s when Halo became really big. So I've competed a lot. My username in pretty much every game that I compete in on Discord servers and stuff like that is Jiu-Jitsu PhD. You can see a picture of me competing in the middle picture there in a tournament. I've designed games for both corporate and government entities, games and simulations, real games like real war games, real live simulations, and virtual live simulations. More recently, I started an esports club over the last year at my university. We had our first tournament this fall. We had 70 competitors and about 120 attendees. Since then, it kind of went from this idea of starting a club to like talking about like arenas and real teams. Our club pretty much grew overnight to by leaps and bounds, just grew exponentially, where we've now had multiple tournaments. I've been invited to do tons of things with the community. It's kind of crazy how it's worked out. I've submitted curriculum on eSports that's going to hopefully start next fall or spring semester. Graduate and undergraduate certificate in eSports. I've been helping high schools. I've been helping middle schools develop eSports clubs, develop eSports curriculum. I've formed teams. I'm now actually coaching and helping out with teams in 4 different games at UNCW. And our next step is an arena and actually turning eSports into a varsity sport. But what we're going to really focus on today is just, and I won't be long. I'm going to make sure I'm monitoring my time. Is basically what's happening in eSports and ed tech, and why I really think that this is like the next step for us as an educational technologist. So, and I'm not going to go into a lot of eSports numbers. I just want to have a few just so you guys understand the impact of what eSports is. If you're not familiar with eSports or really the size of it, I just want to have 3 screens here really quick about the numbers. So this first number, 100 million, is the number of people that viewed the 2018 League of Legends tournament. That's also the same number of people that view the Super Bowl in America. 3 times the size of, like the World Series games for baseball. So as far as like viewership and popularity, very popular. And that game, League of Legends, where this 100 million people viewed, is a game I probably have about like 10 years of my life into as well. There are currently more subscribers to Twitch and YouTube gaming channels than there are for Netflix. And that's an eSports arena picture in the background there in Las Vegas. And Goldman Sachs estimates that revenue is increasing about 35 to 40% over for the foreseeable future in eSports. Those are some great statistics and some great numbers just to kind of show like that this is popular, but like it doesn't tell us much about like education. Like, what does that mean for us? Like, why does popularity or what's happening like in that realm really affect us? Like, what is the importance there? So it means that students are interested in it. It means that there is this huge percentage of the population of kids under 18 and people the ages of 18 to like 70 that are really, really, really interested in this. There's a very large sector of the population in this. But so what? I mean, people are interested in football. There was that many people to watch football, and way more people than that watch the World Cup. So like, still, like, what does it matter? We just know that there's this motivation, this popularity. It means that companies are interested. It means that people are making money off of this because there's this huge audience of like sponsorships and all this stuff is happening. There's a lot of money in the field. So where does that really fall on us, and why does it impact us at all? Because schools are interested. Not only are K-12 schools are interested in it, but naturally everything that happens in the K-12 world as far as technology falls on who in K-12? It falls on the educational technologist, the tech facilitator, the person that we are training in our master's and doctoral programs across the country to go into K-12 schools and work there. That's who's being charged with setting up these eSports programs in K-12 education. And for that reason, it's now something that people are coming, my alumni are coming to me and asking me, how do I do this? My school wants me to coach an eSports team. I don't know anything about it. How do I do that? My school wants me to set up an eSports tournament. How do I do that? The ed tech faculty are the ones being charged with this. So it's something we're starting to see as something that educational technologists really need, especially those going into K-12, need to start to learn about eSports. If any of you went to the FETC conference in Florida this January, you can see this was one of just a blog post about FETC on their website. One of the big things that they promoted there was eSports. And for those who aren't familiar with FET, it's the Future of Educational Technology Conference. It's one of the biggest K-12 ed tech conferences in the nation, next to ISTE. It's probably the biggest. It might be just as big as ISTE, but those are the 2 big ones. And you can see that was one of the big themes there this year was eSports, and for a reason. We have a conference in North Carolina called NC Ties, which is our state educational technology conference. And they specifically reached out and invited all the people across the state working in esports to come speak in a panel for the audience this year. So I was one of the people invited. There's this huge role in ed tech to get involved in esports. So what does the research show? And I don't want to like read through this in depth right now, but really quickly, and you know, what does esports do for education? Like, why do we care? Like, why is it that we care about this, but we're not like trying to focus on football? Like, where is that difference occurring? And where the difference occurring is football's like a real sport, like physical, whereas esports is taking place on the computer. So they're looking at the tech people, which in the K-12 schools is us. So as far as, I have 4 points here that esports really contributes to in the K-12 world in education. First one is STEM. So a large body of research has really found that students who are interested in video games in general or esports there's a high correlation with them going into STEM. And Jason can probably vouch for that because that's what his grant was really, you know, and he's going to talk about that interest there. So I don't want to hit on that too much, but there's a huge body of research showing that people interested in this topic are headed into STEM. And if you're not familiar with that, we have a big problem in our country trying to get people involved in STEM fields. So learning, playing video games, and I don't mean like gamification here if you're thinking that, learning in general, students who play video games have higher grades. So students that play World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, any Fortnite, games that are for fun, not games for learning, in general, perform better in school than students who do not. Now, as far as esports goes specifically, what we found is that there's a large body of students that are being underserved in K-12 education. These are students that don't belong to any clubs. These are students who don't play instruments. These are students who are not on the sports team. But these are students who are going home and they're involved in things like esports, who are playing video games with their friends online. And so what we found is that adding esports clubs to schools or esports programs, whether that's curriculum clubs or sports, has increased student engagement, retention, and inclusion of students that were pretty much cast aside in school. Students who might have felt like they didn't belong. I've had students, my personal students have come to me and said, you know, UNCW, if you're not familiar where we are, we're right on the beach. And they've said, you know, UNCW is a beach school. And I didn't fit in until we had esports at UNCW. I was considering transferring schools. So that inclusion and retention and engagement is really a significant thing.
Are we out of paper? Oh yeah, we have a ton. We have a ton of paper.
Did somebody ask a question?
No, someone outside.
Gotcha. I'm watching the time here. So the current state, so what's happening in K-12 schools right now in esports? So first of all, we're forming national and local leagues. So states, districts are forming leagues, and nationally, we are forming national leagues in collegiate and in high schools. We are forming leagues. Schools are forming clubs. That's usually how they start out. They start out as a club, and they're also starting real varsity teams. Varsity teams that are equivalent to like, you know, basketball or football, the football team, where students can actually get scholarships for going to school. Esports is officially being recognized as a sport by schools, organizations, community, and people in general, and like states and athletic associations are recognizing it. Coaches are being hired. If you guys go onto any of the faculty, you know, the Chronicle or higher ed jobs, wherever we look for jobs in our field, you're going to see coaches. If you just type in esports, you'll see coaches. Not only will you see coaches, you're going to see actual faculty tenure track positions in esports available right now on higher ed jobs and the Chronicle. Curriculum is being designed around esports. Right now, there's like a handful of colleges that have curriculum programs in esports. I would literally say the number's under 30. By next year, that number will be in the hundreds. There are tournaments, conferences, and events happening all over the place all the time. There's a lot of stuff happening. Some really big things happening in esports as far as like conferences are going. Major tournaments, major ed tech conferences focused on just esports are already being formed. And in some cases, schools, not really K-12 just yet, but in college are spending many millions of dollars on esports. okay. I'm getting there. Like less than 5 minutes. I'll be done talking, guys. I try to be quick. As far as careers, so the real reason schools are interested in it is not just, in addition to that, like students can learn and it increases STEM and retention inclusion. In addition to that stuff, this field is creating jobs. There are a number of jobs that people are going into besides just like being a coach at a school. They're around esports tournaments, and that viewership of 100 million is a whole field of people doing different things, such as streaming, organizing tournaments, leadership. I'm going to talk about this stuff in a second. But as far as like the K-12 instructional technologist goes, it's something we're almost going to be expected to do in the next 5 years when you're interviewing at a K-12 school. Hey, can you help out with the esports program? As far as curriculum goes, we have and I've mentioned this a little bit, but I threw up a couple schools here. Some of the bigger schools are University of California, Irvine, Boise, Harrisburg University, Ohio State. These are schools that all have curriculum either coming through the pipes or they're doing it. UCI, California, Irvine, and Boise are pretty much the two biggest esports programs. If you guys aren't familiar with this, Boise's program falls under their ed tech department, whereas UCI's is independent of their university. So where these programs are falling kind of depends. Sometimes they're falling in like a college of business. Sometimes they're falling in the college of ed. Sometimes they're their own thing at a university. Right now, as far as like curriculum in esports goes, we only really have one major model out there, which is the North American Scholastic Esports Federation model, which has divided esports into 4 sectors where they recommend that courses focus around. And I'm not going to go into detail about what those are, but it's really limited. I mean, one of the things that I find when I talk to like professional teams, or I'm talking to a company, or really anyone about esports, especially curriculum, is that we're in the Wild West right now. We don't really know where this is going to be in 5 to 10 years. It's just blowing up faster than really anyone can imagine. So, we're trying to keep pace, and, we're really on our heels the whole time. So what I've done is, going back to the screen where I said there are these 4 sectors of esports, it's really difficult to say like, well, how does this relate to instructional technology? Like I see these 4 like titles like content creator or organizer or strategist, and I see like coaches, theory crafters, analysts, but what does that mean to us? Like, how does that relate to our language as an instructional designer? So what I've done when I was developing my curriculum, is I actually started to match up like what are the competencies that instructional designers do that are expected in the esports world that align with one another. So if you guys just take a look at this screen, you'll probably see, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know that. You should know every single one of those terms up there. You should know what all of that is. This is like, 80% of what an esports person needs to know as well. So you can start to see like how aligned we are with this field. Like understanding systems theory, understanding learning theory, how do people learn, understanding video, if we want to get into the technical side of things like video and audio, history and trends of the game industry are something that we should all know as instructional designers. We should understand at least the basics of game design and instructional design in general, leadership, budget, all the project management stuff.
Hey, Ray.
Yeah.
I noticed another PhD student we have who actually works at NASA with activity programming, and he's really interested in this topic. It just dawned on me, are there models that show that relationship between learning design and technology and esports?
So we are in such early phases of this field that you can probably, I would say that if I went to this NASIF, and this is designed for high schools as well, this would be as close as we've come to it, but no.
What other, I'm thinking dissertation topics, the low-hanging fruit research that needs to be done quickly because the field is moving so quickly. What are some of those you can think of?
I think the biggest things right now would be the impacts of schools. What are the things that are actually happening? especially in the K-12 arena, because there's a lot of stigmatism when you start talking about games. It's like, 15 years ago when you talked about like converting a class online, everyone was like, no, that's the worst thing in the world. That's kind of how people are about games right now. You talk about gaming in schools or in colleges and people just kind of think that it doesn't belong. So I think that the research really needs to show like what are these programs doing for schools?
There's a lot of opportunities for case studies in Oklahoma. There's a lot. The Oklahoma Secondary Schools Association is recognizing an eSports league, and schools in Tulsa in particular have been. So if anybody was interested in case studies, we could definitely hook you up with somebody local. Or John, I'm sure in Houston, Houston ISD probably is involved too. Take notes on these dissertation topic ideas.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's really the big catch. And that was, one of the things that I've spent the last year convincing people in my community and my university and elsewhere that there is a relationship between esports and education whatsoever. And that there's a relationship between esports and instructional design, because people don't necessarily see it. They're starting to see it when I'm getting calls from like 20 different schools in the last month asking for help with this. They're starting to see that relationship. But until that happened, there isn't much out there. It's really pulling from different areas of research and trying to show how video games in general can help, and what like an organized activity that students don't belong to, how that gets them to, how that makes students feel when they're in school. There's really a lot to it that's just not done. I mean, we're in the very early phases of this. As I've said, there's literally 20 programs in the country that have curriculum on esports right now. So there's next year there will be, I know, so many schools starting programs. So it's going to be a big thing, but as of right now, it's not. And just to finish up my presentation, I have a couple pictures here of some stuff. So here's like a picture of one of our tournaments on the right. Here's a picture of our t-shirt. You can see one of our students has the shirt on. Here are some pictures of some students actually playing during a tournament, just to kind of see like what the setup looks like. We always usually have a big monitor, and then we have little monitors for those that are familiar with esports. You generally don't play on more than like a 24 to 32 inch monitor because it becomes too big. So we have, the big one for the audience, the small one for the players. These are some of the flyers we've created for our tournaments. You can see our students, we have graphic artists who are creating like our flyers to advertise what we're doing. But this is all stuff that students are doing for free. They're working these events. They're creating these flyers for fun because they're so passionate about the topic. And then finally, this is a picture of my club. I'm right there on the edge. But this is a picture of one of our club meetings. We have a club meeting every week, and to basically discuss like what we're going to do, what's our next steps, how are we planning our tournaments, all that kind of stuff. But that's my end of my 20 minutes here. If anyone, I don't know if we want to wait for questions until Jason's done, or you guys want to ask me anything now.
Of course, just in a picture, it's hard to tell, but I wonder about diversity in esports. That might be an interesting thing to look into too. If you were doing a case study with a high school, I'm thinking of Union High School at Tulsa has hundreds and hundreds of kids jumped on immediately. But I'm wondering about the populations that it's attracting, which is interesting in terms of STEM, because we work so hard in STEM to increase the diversity as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I would say that it probably attracts a way more diverse crowd than most other things. It's kind of like the students there's a lot of the students that are interested in like the Comic-Cons, and that crowd is really also attracted to esports as well. But you get like athletic people that are, and one of the cool things about esports is that both men and women compete together. There are actually students with disabilities who are like, and I don't mean like a disability like ADHD. I mean like there are people who like can't use their leg, who can only use one hand, and are competing at the professional level, which is really, really, really amazing. Like it doesn't matter if you have a disability, you can still figure out how to compete at the highest levels in esports right now, which is really cool. But like overall, I'd say, yeah, there's a much higher percentage of men. in esports than women. I don't know why that is. It's not that they're not included and shouldn't feel included, and there are definitely theories of why that is. But as far as like, you know, being invited to and feeling included, as far as what I see in our club and even out there, it just happens to be what it is. But I know like that's part of Jason's research, what he's doing with his grant is really talking about that. So I'll let him kind of talk about that as he wants to with his grant stuff. But that is a hot topic in the field right now, is underprivileged, you know, increasing underprivileged populations, getting them interested in STEM and other fields.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Let's, I have tons of questions, but I will hold them afterwards. So Dr. Engerman, if you'd like to join us and take on over. I also just want to recognize Dr. Newman, who's a faculty in our program, who's online as well.
Hi, sorry, I'm doing some work and listening. So, but hello, it's awesome.
Jason, you're free to take over and control the screen if you like.
Thank you, thank you. That was fabulous. Thank you, Ray. I think that's a great actual start, because a lot of the questions that you had there, I am working on. So let me blow this up. We can see this. We can hear me.
Yep.
Check, check. Fantastical. Well, it's great to be with you here today. Again, I do want to respect your time, and here that I want to cover. And obviously, we can only go, you know, into like an appetizer level, because there's a lot more depth here in this space. The esports industry has been around for probably almost 20 years in a formal state, even longer than that. It actually started in about 72 with some space games. And then more recently, we've seen a boom. And there's an economic cycle to it that we need to recognize and understand. The boom is coinciding with a great economy. So I come from a bit, I'm getting an echo. I'm going to bring a business perspective, much like Ray. I've worked in corporate, and I'm going to share that a little bit with you. And that corporate sense coming into education is always interesting, because it speaks to the ability to float between the systems. Usually in academia, we get stuck in this academics without the understanding and the implications of how the business world will kind of react to it at times. I'm saying at times, I'm not holistically judging us, I'm just saying at times. And what esports, I believe, focuses us on and enables us to do is really understand those implications in a more overt way. For example, the NCAA tried to take on esports. They tried to say that we're going to bring this into our bellywag. They did that last year. And last year, they found out at the very same time that they weren't interested in it. They weren't interested in it because of the monetary value that it generates between and amongst players. And they couldn't reconcile the current system that they have, under which players do not receive financial compensation, with the esports culture that is driven by it as a KPI or a key performance indicator. So let me just drive down and talk about who I am, what we're going to talk about. We'll do a little introduction about myself, what I do. Then we talk about what is esports. We talk about the future of esports, and then esports and learning, and close out. And so I've been in education for a while, and I started as a mentor, coach, counselor. You can see that in the middle here. As I coached kids on a football field. That really translated well into my dissertation work. I know this is a visual smattering, but it's supposed to be a smorgasbord, because a lot of what I do is a representation of where I came from. And where I came from in mentoring, coaching, and counseling in the not the academic sense, the athletic sense, translated into my dissertation work, which was about Call of Duty and boys. And as I looked at Call of Duty and boys, I used those football players that I coached to understand holistically how they were coming into the interactive media space. And that work led me into NAPSA, which is the National Athletic and Professional Success Academy. And what I do there is executive coaching. I take professional athletes from the NFL, from their skill sets that they have and have built over many years. I translate that into business skill sets and then connect them with Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 connections to help them advance their skills and, you know, their business acumen along that route. And I have a picture there with me doing that work. So that's what I do on the executive coaching side of the house. I've traveled quite a bit around the country. I've been to some hackathons. I've been to CES, the Consumer Electronics Showcase. I've been out to UCI for quite a few times, especially their esports conferences. Connected with the NASIF people on the ground, connected with HU on the ground, connected with Boise on the ground, and then tried to bring that back to ESU, which is my home. I actually graduated here. This is my alma mater. And in that experience, I've been able to then help them try to begin to build an esports club. And then hopefully eventually that will become an esports varsity team. We are building an arena here. We just got the LSA funding, which is our local state funding that allows us to engage in a high-end academic computing lab that we're going to build out. We've also then connected with our resident living, and we're going to help integrate into a living learning community. And I've also presented at ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League, on the very issue of the boy-centric, masculine nature of esports and how we might come up with ideas and solutions to toxicity within the esports community. So the ADL Sports Council includes Roger Goodell, Venus Williams, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and others like that. And then I have a side business with Lightning Legends, where I'm trying to create an entity that helps underrepresented populations integrate and engage with the esports industry at the high school level in ways that are really organic and authentic and promotes entrepreneurship. And then lastly, the NSF grant piece, which talks about culturally relevant computing, where we're looking at underrepresented populations of homeless, foster care, out of home placement, out of school placement, and bringing them into a camp environment, and then teaching them games in general can help enhance their STEM career potential, essentially is what we're doing. That'll happen this summer, actually. So we're doing some really great partnerships, right now with the Overwatch League down at Philly Fusion, which is our local Philadelphia team for Overwatch, and then partnering with the 76ers too, and Twitch just to get that off the ground. So that's my general experience. So let's talk about what esports is. Video game industry is massive. It's about $120 billion industry worldwide. It's large. But esports is kind of the special sauce underneath it, within it. Very much like a genre of the movie industry might be comedy. Esports is a flavor of the much larger landscape of video games. Now, we have this high competitive element, but it also crosses ages. And one of its main features is competition, but also, if you look at Hannah Gerber and in her team's work, she speaks about 3 particular elements that define and distinguish it from regular video games, and that's enhanced competition, teamwork, and collaboration. And they're unique forms of the combination of those 3 things. For me, I had to distinguish esports from video games. I've included what I call KPIs, or sometimes they're KPIs and sometimes they're business value drivers. But the business value drivers that are unique and distinct from the video game community, and they include, and this is from the esports community themselves, this is conversations that I've had with people in the industry. It has to have a leaderboard. It has to have paid team salaries. It has to have a league structure. Okay, and it has to be driven by five other value drivers, which are ad revenue, sponsorships, merchandise, and media rights. And so when you combine these things, that's where the esports kind of emerge. But as we have conversations with Manny Anelko, for example, who used to be one of the managing directors at MLG, Major League Gaming, he says that this is not just a movement. It's not just something that we do. It's not just something that Generation Z or Alpha does. It's a social network. Fortnite is a social network. Apex Legends is a social network. Overwatch is a social network. So more than just being something that people do or engage in, it is the place and space where they connect with people that are like-minded and like to do the same things that they do. And that's really powerful because it means that it's more than some superfluous activity that goes on. It's a lifestyle. And this is really evident when we start of the esports industry, right? Whether it be sports game genre, MOBAs, first-person shooters, or fighting game community. The fighting game community, in some sense of the words, you know, they will kind of, some of them will battle against the idea that they're an esport, right? They don't even want to be associated. So we need to understand that esports is not just something that we do and some activity that certain people do, but it is a lifestyle. It is a way that they like to live and want to express themselves in the world and connect with other people. So some of the key features of the telecommunication and co-location practices, right? The communities that are built, the team collaboration, the streaming elements that allow us to get to one-to-one synchronous experiences in real time. And that's one of the key features of this new movement of the experience age as well. And so it's not just entertainment, but it is entertainment. And then it's also digital content creation driven. So it's creative driven as much as it is a elements. There are that, but there's also creativity driven. So many people are creating content and contributing to the space. And that, I think, is one of the key elements that really drives ownership of the space. It's my cultural community. It's my space. It's where I belong because I've contributed to it. So these are the types of games that we all involve ourselves with and consider traditional esports because the high competition, some of the online features and environments, and more importantly, the affinity spaces that draw out of these spaces. And again, I talk about genres. Genres are very important because certain people drive through certain genres, and genres are the collections of types of games, whether they be first-person shooters, MOBAs, the fighting game community, or fighting games themselves, or sports games, right, or real-time strategy games. And then we have this new thing called BRs. So these things that are coming together, I am a first-person shooter. You know, Ninja has made his living on first-person shooters. That's where he lives. And he migrates back and forth between first-person shooter types. Halo, that's where he started. Then he moved to Fortnite, which is where we know him now. You know, and he has an easy migration then over to another game, something like a Call of Duty, something like a CSGO or Rainbow Six. He would migrate into that direction for the most part. Not that he doesn't play other games, which he does. It's just that those are the spaces and places where he would most likely thrive in the type of player that he is. So esports is everywhere. And what we need to understand from the business perspective is that the NFL has a piece of it. European football has gotten a piece of it. Goldman Sachs is getting a piece of it. Comcast right here in Philadelphia has a huge piece of it. They're building a $50 million stadium down in Philly, in Center City, Philly. Not only that, they put $20 million into Philly Fusion to buy them in the first place. So they put a $70 million investment into this industry. That's legit. And when we talk about those types of numbers and the $1.5 billion industry that it is, we're talking about people voting with dollars, putting value on it. It doesn't need legitimacy. It already has it. So if we're sitting here as educators thinking that we need to legitimize this entity or movement, we're dead wrong. We're out of our minds because these young people at 16 years old are winning $3 million prize pools. They don't need us. These 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 17-year-olds are making six-figure salaries. We have a young lady here who's an influencer. Before she graduated college, she has six-figure salary by partnering. Six-figure salary before she graduates. Our legitimacy is not necessary for the field and this entity from a business perspective and economic perspective to thrive. But we do need to understand that it is underneath an economic cycle. And I'm going to show you some really interesting things that are happening. So where is it in education, right? So the question is, this is it out in the real world, right? Where is it in education? Well, we're talking about 50 plus varsity programs. Big Ten has its own, thing going on. Riot Games also had its own league going on for a spell. D1, D2, D3 is seeing Ontario College Athletic Association. NAIA is the Athletics Association. WAC, NWAC is another one. And National Junior Collegiate Athletic Association. What these represent are institutions buying into the process. These are institutions that are saying interscholastic sphere, our sphere. This is the public sphere. Public sphere saying this is where esports is and important. This also, I guess, the education sphere. So there's a ton of value that the industry is generating. Okay. But the next question would be, well, then where's the real value in jobs and job placement? Well, we can look at many really cool sites like Indeed.com and Monster.com, and Hitmarker in particular is really where the esports jobs are located. Like this is the central location where esports jobs are located. I love how Ray Pastore mentioned higher ed. The Higher Ed Chronicles is putting postings up. But these other spaces, if you go to Indeed.com, you're looking over 500 postings for esports jobs. If you look at Hitmarker.com, it ran up from about 450 just last year, around in September. It had about 450 postings to over 1,000 postings now, over 1,000. And when we did a breakdown of this is what we saw in terms of the positions. We saw about 24% were in marketing and sponsoring. We saw 12% in team management, 32% in STEM, 9% sales, 9% product management and business development and partnerships, right? 32% in STEM. That's huge. That's massive. So we figured that there was a great opportunity to penetrate this area and talk about the opportunities that exist there, especially and particularly for underrepresented populations. And that's what allowed us to really make the argument for the exploratory grant that we received. So I am looking at the time. I see that it's going up. I'm gonna close this out within about a minute or 2 minutes, or 2 to 3 minutes. So the future is going up really quickly. This is me kind of talking about innovation and how innovation kind of just takes off in spurts. There were about 7 years to come to fruition, but the internet took about 5 to 6, right? Essentially, or 10. Esports has taken off a lot faster than that because of the access to technology, because of the co-location practice and telecommunications tools that exist there. It's allowed to have the infrastructure to move a lot quicker. And that's why we're seeing this incredible boom, this explosion happen. The positions, again, specifically, I'm trying to go on, these two should actually be together. But the specific positions, we're seeing them in tech, we're seeing software engineering, IT specialists, interactive media, graphics and design, and web development and content development. Actually, down here is where we feel we can focus our energy as digital media technologists. So this is where we're focusing our energy and our grant activities. Then there are management and reporting that we saw positions. The legitimacy is here. So this is a real job application back in 2013. This was 2000 real job applications for positions, right? And we were just legitimizing the fact that graphic designers and content creators were wanted in the industry and getting full salaries for these positions. And so here's what I think is interesting. And I'm kind of speeding up here because I took my timer a bit early. I want questions. Look, the industry is growing so fast that these opportunities are emerging extraordinarily quickly. This is Super League Gaming. Super League Gaming last year, about April, something like April 2nd, they went public. This is one of the first entities to go public. And when we talk about public, we talk about like New York Stock Exchange, public. They went public and they have stock that you can buy on them right now, today. That's huge. Not only that, we see franchises such as restaurant franchises kind of morphing, right, and trying to take on this new esports element and kind of grabbing and bringing down is one of those. They got about 26, probably 30 now plus franchises worldwide and at the intersection of this esports restaurant business. They have their own team, which is really fascinating. GamerPod, something new and interesting. I just talked to these guys last week. They're fascinating. They actually join us with our grant. They built a pop-up streaming service, basically. This thing is like a tent. Like in 20 minutes, 2 people pop this thing up and you've got a all-in-one streaming experience wherever you are. Incredible. These guys here, GameCo, are a casino gaming entity. All right, so you think about it like it's almost skill-based too, which is, you know, that gets a little dicey. But basically transforming the casino industry into these kind of skill-based esports experiences within within casinos. That's what these guys specialize in, right? And having success. Not only that, about that, right? There's a Girl Gamer Esports Festival. It's happening in Dubai. It actually just happened this past weekend. So that's fresh off the press. But right here in Philly, Team Dignitas is, has an all-girls team, and they actually are doing pretty well and pretty successful. So Winter Olympics also in 2018 had esports. So we're not talking about esports, you know, coming to the Olympics. It's already there. It's already there. So anyway, this is my work, and this is stuff that I've put out into the world at esports conferences. And this is one of those, the Emerging Warrior, where we had a provost colloquium. We brought the idea of esports to the campus and said, hey, this is a great opportunity. Check this out. And then the students were able to run, you know, that's a $10,000 switcher right there for a League of Legends event. They were doing the shoutcasting. They were playing. They were all over the place in terms of production. And we had about 20 of the students engage in that space. This is a freshman running a $10,000 4K switcher. So that story, we had about 200 plus participants, which is really cool and a great turnout. This here then was me turning this and converting this into actual curriculum content and doing a Discord chat, bot chat seminar with students that they really enjoyed too. And I got to present that at the esports conference. So the grant is about $450,000. We are going to do 2 camps. One's a video game camp and the other one's an esports camp. We're going to compare the two, and we have a great system and C classroom that has all the bells and whistles and has the ability to really host the experience for about 48 total lucky foster care kids slash homeless slash out of home placement, out of school placement students across game design, graphics and web, digital media production, and digital media marketing and video production. So there is a vision for esports. Interscholastic. We have to have digital media marketing. We have to have entrepreneurship. We need to have computer science, communications, all coming together to really showcase the potential for esports as not just something that we do, but really a way of life for digital, you know, quote unquote, a digital native environment. I know that's a hot topic right now in terms of terminology, but these kids grow up in a digital environment, and so this is where they reside. And so you asked the question of what might this look like, and this is NASIF's visual drawing. I just wanted to show it to you. And the work that they do with Steinkuhler and Anderson, but this is a visual of what the intersection of interscholastic activity and curriculum might look like. And there are many others that have different versions. Actually, I'm building a certification right now for our class. I did a lot of talking. There's a lot there. Apologize for going so long, but that is what I have for now. Thanks for letting me babble. And what I do want to do is I want to open up for questions that you might have. I'm going to stop share.
Well, thank you very much, both Jason and Ray, for your thoughts. I'm going to open it up for conversations.
Jason, I wanted to ask you about, I started life out as a basketball player and coach, and I see the connections between coaching physical sport, well, that's not the right word, you know what I mean, an athletic sport and teaching and life skills and those connections easily. how do you, and I hear Ray saying that he articulated well the connection between instructional technology, educational technology, and eSports. Has there been a lot researched on, or what do you know about making that jump comparison? Or should we even be comparing eSports to athletic events? Should we be comparing it to learning? When you popped up the curriculum logo a while ago, I was picturing in my head a K-12 curriculum that had standards for learning associated with different games. I don't know what that question is. Maybe just comment.
Yeah, I think is it valuable worth our time comparing the electronic or the digital e-space coaching and learning to the physical? The answer is hard. I don't know. I think as people that are curious, I think you should follow that curiosity wherever it leads you, and then generate knowledge. And that's the task of, PhDs, and EDDs too, is to follow the passion of where the questions lead you, and generate new knowledge about relationships across learning. For me personally, and I think it depends on your end goal. For me personally, I would not be interested in that work because coming from athletics, coming from that background, I've competed nationally at a very young age. I've coached and been success coaching the physical sports, from basketball to swimming to snowboarding. I've done a lot of that, and I know the relationship across those in terms of optimizing performance. And out of the Penn State degree, we're learning performance systems. So we're about optimizing human performance. And so optimizing human performance for me at the end game is about having underrepresented populations being able to support themselves and sustain themselves in real ways. So for me, all of my energy is focused on getting those that don't have the access and the tools and the skills to optimize their own performance by way of citizenship and participation. So that's entrepreneurship. And for me, it's economic and financial stability. That's my focus. So looking at the question of, for me, and I'm going to kick this to Ray because he can, shed some light on this. Looking over at, whether we should compare physical sports and all, we've already done that. We know what that looks like. The physical sports and how to optimize that performance in that way it's been done in the physical sense. It hasn't been done so much as an e-sense, and I can see how it could be of value. But at some point, these are going to merge. And what's happening in the esports space is it's moving so fast. The technology is moving fast. It's moving to AI. It's moving to virtual VR so quickly that you're going to see a merger happen before that research ever sees the light of day, in my opinion. That's just me. I think that people do whatever they want to do, and it could be an interesting question. But by the time the people that I'm concerned about personally are able to catch up, that ship is light years away, and they're, that economic gap that I'm interested in personally is so far and that's why we need to start having a conversation of new ways of approaching research in this space. Because the analogy would be that you're trying to catch a bullet train with a bite. That's the analogy. That's the best way I can articulate what I'm trying to say to answer your question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It was a great question, a hard question. Yeah, Ray, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree that I think there is definitely a relationship there. I mean, we're seeing esports programs being started in athletic departments, and what we're seeing in esports is hey, these kids can't just sit in front of a computer. What's the ergonomics of it? Sitting down, I'm sitting in a computer. Is this chair comfortable? Is this good for my back? How do I stretch? What is the athletic component? And it is there. There is that piece of it. What is healthy? an esports player be eating, like, so that they're energized? Should they be just drinking like energy drinks 24/7? And so there is that like health and athletic aspect to it, but like esports is definitely like a different field. Like athletics can't just come in and do it because it's all the tech and the streaming, and it's like this whole different like community. I mean, it really is its own different thing, as Jason said. Like it's different.
Yeah, we can take best practices
Yeah.
and like move them over, but yeah, they are two different worlds. Now they'll merge eventually. I think that they are merging even in and of itself. Just like you said, I love how you said the seats, I mean, manual dexterity, hand-eye coordination, all that stuff. And then there's this Hadou. Hadou is, and have you checked out Hadou? Hadou is virtual reality. It's like virtual dodgeball.
Yeah, there's that coming in too. That's the next evolution of esports, is virtual reality, like first-person shooters and stuff. It
Right.
will come. Like it is coming. It's
Guys, questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ray and Dr. Jason. So I'm kind of having a good interest in terms of setting up a game station for my kids at home, for them to be able to, exhibit some skills on them too. But I realize they usually take more time even playing games on their tablet and so on. So is there a limit to what time we can allow kids to, according to their age, to stay on the screen and be playing games? And then that's one question. Then in terms of the curriculum, how do we actually compare learning and esports? Those are my questions. Thank you.
real quick on the screen time thing. So I field this question all the time. I have like 3 YouTube videos about it. So first of all, as far as like esports and playing video games, after about like an hour and a half, your like dexterity towards the game starts to diminish. So if you're like competing, if you're trying to compete for like 5 hours straight, that's like trying to play a football game for 5 hours straight. Like you get tired. So you know that after like in that 1 to 2 hour period, like your reflexes start to slow down. Your mind isn't working well. So like as far as competition, like you don't want to do it longer than that. As far as like kids and screen time, I tell parents that it's, hey, it's different by kid. Some kids, 10 minutes is too much. And some kids can sit there for 3 hours on a screen and they're going to be completely normal, but it's all about moderation. Like I can drink water. I can die from drinking too much water. So like everything's bad, like video games in moderation, and that differs by kid.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was the second part of the question? He answered the first one perfectly. I agree. But what was the second part? You had a second part to that question.
Yeah, the curriculum aspect. I want to know more how the comparison between the normal curriculum and esports curriculum.
Great question. Ooh, I love it. That excites me. Here's the deal. About 10, oh shoot, no, it wasn't 10. It was almost 20 years ago, same time. So around 2003, in 2000, G was talking about deep depth game-based curriculum. He laid down a foundation for us. He's considered the grandfather of video game-based learning. And at that point in time, what some people got was that what he's saying has to fundamentally shift how we teach in classrooms today. Some people got it and some people didn't. And then they bastardized it and they did this whole thing that we call serious gaming or serious game-based learning. And I'm not talking about serious game-based learning as something that's terrible and bad. What I'm saying is that when we take an idea such as video game-based learning the way that he wrote it, and I know this because I had a conversation with him, he was talking about shifting and transforming the paradigms of teaching and learning in the classroom holistically. So with esports, because it is a new way of interaction, because it is a brand new with people. It requires us to shift the way that we would normally teach and learn in a classroom. What does that look like? What does that mean? Well, if you look at this picture that I showed you, we're talking about strategies, coaching, theory, analysts, software development, shoutcasting, streaming, journalism. These elements are not about sitting in front of a classroom and getting downloaded and uploaded information. That's not what this is talking about. So we have to fundamentally think about, and I've had a conversation with Tom and these guys, and they talk about the fact that their traditional approaches have failed. So they have all the pieces in place, but they've tried traditional approaches and they have not been successful. And I looked at them and told them, well, what are you doing? So, we're trying to put this in the classroom, build it like curriculum. And then he's like, no, we need to talk about out of school time. We need to have conversations about like in a new setting, in a different setting. And so crafting curriculum that is interdisciplinary, that is interactive, that is moving, and that mimics the organic nature of the esports community is necessary. And that's gonna shift our instructional design approaches and strategies to become more interactive, to become more productive oriented, product oriented, and content creation oriented, as I mentioned earlier, I believe.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time and say thank you very much to Dr. Engerman and Dr. Pastore for their presentation.
I have a question.
John, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I've had a lot of connection issues over here. But one of the questions was, you had brought up esports doesn't have to legitimize itself, but thinking, how do you legitimize it in front of school districts to get them to buy into the viability and how it can impact kids K through 12. What are your thoughts on how to do that? Because one of the activities that we have here at NASA is working with some underrepresented schools, and the partnership that they have with NASA. They actually talked about that, and ironically, we had a conversation about them forming esports teams and looking into it. But I think selling it is going to be the hard part to some degree.
Dr. Pastore, take it, and I'll follow up. Yeah.
So Jason's comment about it doesn't need to legitimize itself. He's talking about industry there. It doesn't. Right. It'll pass us right by, and it already has. It'll pass us right. They don't need us for esports to be successful. It's successful without colleges, and that's, but where you're talking about, like, how do we sell this in the K-12 arena? That's where we have to start bringing in that research and showing, like, well, this is how it increases STEM, and this is how it can help with student learning, and this is how it includes students, especially students from like disadvantaged populations that can really benefit from this. And you have to bring it as that. Like, I can't. So just let me give you an example. I can't walk into a school district and start talking about numbers. I can't say 100 million people watch this and the revenue of esports, because they don't care.
Right.
Now, there are certain people at that table that care about that, and I need to bring those numbers to them individually. But like in general, like I'm bringing this to a college of education. Those aren't the type of things they care about. Now, the College of Business does.
Absolutely right.
But like the College of Education cares about the learning component, and that's what I have to bring.
Right, and how it eventually will impact test scores.
But we are going to have a big impact.
Learning.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a big impact in esports. Like, they need, like, as soon as they want, I mean, the high schools, they need us. Like, it's the Wild West right now, and there's so much disorganization among leagues, among things that are happening, and it's going to all come together and, like, work out. But it's like everyone's, like, fighting for their piece. There's rich people buying teams. There's rich people starting leagues. There's all kinds of different tournaments happening. I mean, it's really interesting to watch the chaos of it. And ironically, it's working. A lot of it's working.
So is there a format or a structure set up for K through 12 and how to set it up, or is that still something that's kind of
there's
getting
stuff
off
out
the
there.
ground?
Like if you look at
Yeah.
NASIF, so the picture you actually see on the screen of Jason's, the
Mhm.
NASIF, that's one of the slides I showed as well. They have like a whole template for high schools.
Okay.
They're a really good resource for high schools. They have a whole template. They have a high school league. You can sign up for them. They have a bunch of material, but like even like with my club, like we joined a bunch of the collegiate leagues, and they help support us. Like they send us a bunch of materials. Here's what clubs look like. We're dealing with NACE, which is the National College Organization, and like they'll set us like here's example rooms of here's the technology you should have. Here's how much it costs. Here's a presentation to sell this to your college. There's a lot of information out there that's really going to the organizations, and they're providing that to you. But in education, yeah, you got to sell them on the learning and stuff.
Right. So, okay.
So
All
this is NASIF. Also look at HSEL, which is High School Esports League. They have some really great.
HSEL.
Those are, yeah, HSEL. It's High School Esports League. NASIF is the go-to. They're nonprofit. They're nonprofit for the most part, and they have the biggest. They got the heavy hitters. Let's put it that way. The heavy hitter partnerships, out there at Silicon Valley. Here's what I would say quickly on that is that if you want to convince anyone of anything, you just have to convince them that you're on their team. And so in order to be on their team, you probably in underrepresented populations need to talk about three things. The first is attendance. You need to talk about how this could improve and enhance attendance rates, because you can set the standards on the club membership with attendance. The second is engagement. And then you need to say engagement to what? And if you're pointing them in the right direction, it would be engagement to STEM, right? Or engagement to math, or engagement to technology, engagement to fill in the blank. And the third thing is numbers. Okay, how many? Number 100, that's a big number. How many kids do you have in the Bellywig that are joining right? How many are there? So those three things are selling points, I think, when you talk about underrepresented populations that are really important, because they need metrics, right? And so attendance is one, truancy is a huge deal with underrepresented populations. We know that. So get them there. Ooh, look, the kids are here. Why are they here?
Exactly.
Oh, because we have this club that they belong to. The second thing,
I can attest to that, because when I was in the classroom, I did do like robotics and chess club, and those got those kids that weren't into physical, athletics and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and I could relate to those kids because I really wasn't a sports kid like that. I didn't play athletic sports. So,
yeah. And those numbers will then tell the story too. If you've got 50 kids that are showing up.
Definitely.
That are doing fill in blank, and everything else is on top of that, because then you start to say, here are leadership positions that they've taken on themselves, and those types of things we know translate into they're here more. I don't have to go chase them down anymore. Right. They're engaged in STEM activities, Title IV. Go get after that Title IV and start saying, well, this is, Title IV activities, and they're doing 3D printing, and they're doing finance and accounting, and they're doing what are the other graphics and web. They're doing these things that are outputs and outcomes, or they're doing IT, or they're doing computer, hardware, the activities. This is what I'm doing with Lightning Legends right now in Philadelphia. And when I stepped and had a conversation with their superintendent, it was, they saw me as a vendor, and we weren't ready to be vendors. We weren't ready to solve those problems that they needed until I had data that backed it up. And so with that pilot and proof of concept, it was, now attendance, volume, I also put in like quality of life and engagement and connectivity and things of that nature, their connectivity to the school roads, things like that.
Got you.
And volume, every time we put on an event, 50 plus kids are there, and they're paying into the system. So
what's the name of your research? Cause I can I would like to look at that and share that with some of my colleagues here.
So my research isn't out yet. It is
Okay.
at the that's executed this summer. That's that work right there. The other work is on the side of that, so that will be coming out.
Okay.
But I could send you some of my colleagues' work on stuff. So I'll send you these guys' work. So Steinkühler and Anderson, they've got some stuff about STEM and entrepreneurship. And then Hannah Gerber's got some stuff about API data and camps that really could help out too. I'm not sure who else's work that I'm aware of that works at the intersection of esports STEM. Now we have video game based learning in STEM. We've got tons of that stuff. But esports, we need esports STEM. That's a little bit different. So that stuff will start coming out. Someone hit me with the chat box. Okay, yeah, John, I got your information. I'll send you some stuff.
I'm sending you 2 different ones.
All right, again, let me just say thank you. I know, Jason, you had a hard stop for a meeting to get to as well.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, sorry.
I forgot about that.
You gotta go. Thank you very much. Ray, thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Play video games. That's my final thought.
Fantastic.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I hijacked it at the end. Hey, Io. Hey, Dr. Asino.
Thank you,
Thank
Jason.
you, guys.
Thank you, Tutaleni. Nice seeing you guys.
Thanks, Ray. Good seeing you.
All right.
And nice meeting everyone else.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
All right, see y'all.
All right, see you.